SCP-6141. The dark screams louder than the light. Object Class: Euclid. Special Containment Procedures. The Eastern Hemisphere is to be constantly monitored with satellites in low Earth orbit. These satellites are to be mounted with cameras capable of resolution which can resolve details that are indicative of SCP-6141 presence at the street levels. Details indicate of the presence of SCP-6141 include: 1. The lack of any functioning automobiles, commonly rusted and missing wheels, as if exposed to the elements for far longer than elapsed time would indicate, when previously vehicles were maintained and functioning. 2. The lack of a population, and lack of evidence that a population previously has inhabited the town or city in decades, when previously there was a population in activity. 3. The lack of maintenance to structures commonly left overgrown with foliage and beginning to deteriorate when structures previously were maintained and undamaged. Should any of these signs be detected, then a small security unit led by a volunteer researcher or doctor of Level 2 access or above will enter the area and seek out SCP-6141. Upon locating SCP-6141, the researcher will engage in conversation with the entity, and after finishing the conversation, leave the area. Any experiments on or interviewing of SCP-6141 should be done during this time. Personnel is required to be respectful and professional with the entity during the conversation, though are not required to be clinical. SCP-6141 is considered contained when 24 hours pass and the entity's effect ceases. The general population should be interviewed post-containment under the guise of a government census. During containment, roads into the area should be blocked under the explanation that an accident has occurred ahead. During the interview process with the general population post-event, interviewers must avoid informing the interviewed that substantial time has passed without them noticing. Should any of the affected become conscious that time has passed without their knowledge and begin to show signs of nervousness and/or panic, apply Class C amnestics. The researcher in charge of containment must be fluent in the language common to the area that SCP-6141 has manifested in. Personnel must leave the 5-kilometer radius around the entity within the 24 hours after having conversed with the entity. Description: SCP-6141 is a human adult male, appearing between 25 and 30 years old. SCP-6141 does not appear to age. Approximately 2 meters in height. SCP-6141 takes the ethnicity, language, and culture of the majority population as its own, depending on where it is currently located. SCP-6141 is commonly seen wearing camouflaged clothing, balaclavas, a load-bearing vest, a backpack, and other miscellaneous casual wear typical of the local cultural lower class. SCP-6141 is manifested with firearms of various models. SCP-6141 has typically manifested with a pump-action shotgun of an unknown model and is currently being researched. SCP-6141 manifests in inhabited locations with an approximate population between 5,000 and 25,000 in the Eastern Hemisphere of Earth. SCP-6141's manifestation causes its surroundings to enter a state of advanced urban decay and the disappearance of all persons living therein. After its departure, these changes are reverted, with the inhabitants of the region retaining no memory of their temporary absence. Upon manifestation, SCP-6141 is already present in the center of the area, with a makeshift campfire already created. Unless directly conversed with, SCP-6141 is content to simply sit there doing idle tasks such as creating wooden trinkets, playing the guitar, or cooking. When SCP-6141 sees fit to end the instance and leave, it will put out the fire, ensuring no embers remain, and pack its things. Note from Dr. Blackwell. I am curious as to why SCP-6141 only manifests in the Eastern Hemisphere. Is it their home? Does it have to do with their origins? We've asked time and time again, yet they've always said they've told us already. I can't figure it out. Even if an instance of SCP-6141 lasts for a month or more, the population assumes that they've done their usual mundane domestic activities during that time. If an affected individual is informed that from an outside perspective, a substantial amount of time has passed, they will display extreme discomfort, confusion, and anxiety. This suggests that these memories are made up subconsciously to attempt to explain why they've seemingly lost time. Afterward, when asked if they've seen SCP-6141 when presented a photo, The affected will at some point in their timeline know the exact time, date, and location of where they have seen SCP-6141. Adolescent behavior regarding SCP-6141 is the opposite. Adolescents realize to a degree that time has been lost and cannot provide an explanation of what happened from the start of the instance of SCP-6141 to the end. This effect has been shown to not be detrimental to public health, so long as Class C amnestics are applied to those afflicted. See Interview Log SCP-6141-1. Note from Dr. Blackwell. The jury is still out on what exactly is causing these memory time problems that the denizens experience. A psychologist friend of mine suspects that it simply has to do with how older patients recall information less accurately than younger patients. Probably incorrect, but that still leaves needing to explain all their reactions to time loss, not to mention Frederick Stenger's account. Maybe it's something 6141 can control. Either way, I am gonna need more ibuprofen. SCP-6141 is non-hostile, and will not engage Foundation personnel. Despite having ready access to a weapon, SCP-6141 has never drawn it in hostility, nor fired upon Foundation personnel. When being conversed with, SCP-6141 responds in the language relevant to the area it has arrived at, and fully understands what is being spoken to it regardless of the language used. This is why either an interpreter or researcher fluent in the language is required to understand SCP-6141. Personnel who have spoken with SCP-6141 feel them to be warm, kind, and light-hearted. SCP-6141 commonly discusses existential topics and thoughts. These thoughts typically surround the indomitable nature of the human spirit in the face of adversity, as well as the soul's connection to music and the universe. These discussions are generally upbeat and positive. SCP-6141's speeches in fact have a non-anomalous morale-boosting effect on personnel, and are being copied down for use in motivational media for Foundation personnel, with SCP-6141's permission. SCP-6141 has agreed that their words may be used in such a capacity. SCP-6141's infatuation in this discussion, however, is, quote, the ability for humanity to be able to overpower the feeling of emptiness through willpower and friendship alone, to realize that no man or woman is alone in the darkness. If confronted with the idea that its beliefs are false, SCP-6141 will present a case-by-case basis of events that the human spirit has preserved despite the crushing darkness to back up their beliefs. Notable events mentioned by SCP-6141 include, but are not limited to, the April 26, 1986 Chernobyl nuclear meltdown, the September 11, 2001 terror attacks, World War I, World War II, Redacted, the Black Plague, the Bronze Age collapse, the site Redacted containment breach of Redacted 19 Redacted. Discovery. SCP-6141 was first discovered on March 20th, 2008 in the town of Coney in the country of Georgia after detecting an alarming cessation of telecommunications activity. SCP-6141 was seen by a team of agents at a makeshift campfire preparing chico kibli, a Georgian cultural dish. Assuming hostility, the agents drew their firearms, however at the behest of the agent in charge on scene, Agent Levon, they holstered their weapons upon approach. Agent Levon and their team then took seats with SCP-6141 at its request. At the time, only Agent Levon could understand the entity, due to SCP-6141 and Agent Levon being the only ones who could speak and understand Georgian. Agent Levon then began conversing with SCP-6141. See Addendum 6141-1. Addendum 6141-1. Audio log. SCP-6141-1. The following audio log is transcribed from Georgian to English. Audio is captured from Agent Levon's digital recorder. Begin log. Agent Levon. Hey, how are you? SCP-6141. Oh, I'm quite fine. Thank you for providing me company this dreary day, friend. You're welcome. Do you have a name? No, I'm afraid not. Do you? You can just call me Levon. Levon, a good name. You can call me friend, or whatever suits you. Thank you, friend. I hate to spoil a good campfire, but I'm afraid we'll have to take you into custody if you would come willingly. Ah, You are the Foundation. I figured you would come at some point. Would you like something to eat? I am afraid not, friend. Now, would you come with us willingly? SCP-6141 sighs. 4 seconds of silence. I mean no sarcasm when I say this, Levon. As much as I would love to be in your Foundation's comfortable custody, I'm afraid my work must continue. Your work? Is there something stopping us from forcibly arresting you, friend? Yes, there is. I do not mean this as a threat, merely as a fact. You, or your Foundation, would not appreciate the results if you were to put restraints on me. And just what would occur if I did. This place you see before you will not return to its original state if you arrest me, and I will get away. You will lose over 6,000 people and fail to contain me. This is a poor state of affairs for you, as well as myself, and I would rather you avoid that if all possible. I mean that from the bottom of my heart, Levon. I appreciate your forthcoming nature about that, friend. Is there anything we can do? Well, I suppose you could follow me wherever I go. I believe we are all capable of seeing past the darkness through the help of each other, and make sense of chaos together. Levon, we are never alone. All of you, the Foundation, are never alone. End log. Closing statement. SCP-6141, Agent Levon, and his team converse for 2 more hours on politics and spirituality before Agent Levon and his team announce they are leaving. SCP-6141 begins to clean up its campsite and extinguish its fire. Agent Levon reports to command and asks for further instructions. Given SCP-6141's explanation, and confirming that Levon and his team are not under memetic or psychic effect, containment is considered not possible at this time. Agent Levon's team is ordered to wait for extraction at a designated extract point outside of the town. Addendum 6141-2. Interview log SCP-6141-2. Interviewed Friedrich Stinger. Interviewer Researcher Butel. Location Redacted, Germany. Begin log. The following interview is transcribed from Bavarian German into English. Researcher Butel is conducting a standard questioning of people affected by SCP-6141. Friedrich Stenger is brought in for questioning, a 16-year-old male showing signs of SCP-6141's after effects. Researcher Butel. Hello, Mr. Stenger. Could you please state your age for the record, please? Friedrich Stenger. Yeah, sure. I turned 16 2 months ago. Thank you. It says here you've reported having severe anxiety and discomfort. What's wrong exactly? Well, I feel like I missed something. Ever felt deja vu? It feels like that, except it hasn't passed, you know? Well, that's perfectly normal, though for such a long term is bizarre. Your concerns are similar to other of your age group. Is there anything else you wish to share? Frederick shows signs of embarrassment. Researcher Butel leans in. This is a safe place, Mr. Stenger. Anything you share with me won't leave this room. When I started to realize I missed something, it felt worse than deja vu. It felt like something bad was going to happen. As if some massive amount of dread had launched itself onto my shoulders, and I had to do something about it. The problem is, I realized I could do nothing. It was awful. Well, Mr. Stenger, you aren't alone. Many others have reported these same symptoms. Thankfully, it's short-lived and we can inoculate you. Thanks, but that's not all, though. Researcher Patel leans back, concerned, and begins to open their notebook, preparing to write. Okay. By all means, go on. I'm listening. I remember having talked to someone at some point. Very clearly. I felt like maybe it was my father or one of my uncles, but they looked different. I can't remember that well. Do you remember what they said? Where it was? Sort of, and no, not at all. I see. Well, please, go on. I think he took me aside at some point to speak with me privately. He had taken me by my shoulder. His hand felt warm, like how a parent or teacher's hand feels on your shoulder when they're proud of you, you know? Yeah, I know the feeling. Please, continue. Well, he told me everything would be okay and that I would turn into a great man, that I shouldn't have to worry about anything. Then he told me, the world's love and light are present and everywhere. The darkness that you see, you only see because it screams the loudest. Stop listening to the screams and listen to the happy whispers. When I remembered that, I felt better. All the anxiety and confusion had gone away. That's really all I remember. That seemed like a very nice individual, though strange. Take a look at this photo for us. Do they look like who you spoke to? Researcher Patel presents a photo of SCP-6141 sitting on a tree stump with their balaclava taken off in their right hand, smiling. The photo was taken before containment procedures were completed. No, but I recognize where they're sitting. My sister and I used to hide in the trees and I remember that stump. Weird. Are they a member of the Bundeswehr? Literally Federal Defense, the Unified Armed Forces of Germany. My brother is an officer, he might know them. Oh, I don't believe so. Thank you for telling us though. I'm afraid that's all I have for you today. If you speak to the woman out front, she will inoculate you. Have a nice day, Mr. Stenger. You too. Thanks for listening to me. End log. Closing statement. Frederick Stenger was given a dose of Class C amnestics to ease the side effects of SCP-6141. They have since forgotten their encounter of SCP-6141, and their life since the interview has returned to status quo. Addendum 6141-3 Interview log SCP-6141-3 Interviewed SCP-6141 Interviewer Dr. Blackwell Location Calatayud, Province of Zaragoza, Spain. Begin log. Dr. Blackwell, after conversing with SCP-6141 for 1 hour, then asks SCP-6141 if they can be given an interview and retrieves a digital audio recorder. The following interview is transcribed into English from Spanish. SCP-6141. Just an interview? Why yes, I can do that. Dr. Blackwell. Thank you. First question. Who are you? Do you have a name? I lack a name, though I prefer to be called friend. As to who I am, I suppose I would be a teacher. Yes, that should be adequate. A teacher? Yes, I'm not sure about my own purpose, but deep down I feel like I exist for a reason. The reason I believe is to teach. Where did you come from? My memory, like anyone else, is not perfect. My earliest memory might be somewhere during the Bronze Age collapse, as it is called. I recall meeting a king, reduced to wearing a sack for clothes, and we talked for some time. The Bronze Age? You know, some of the things our Foundation has kept incredibly secret, and your memory is that long? Yet your memory is not perfect. That information, it merely comes to me. I do not know how or from where. It comes to me just the same as language comes to your lips, or how oxygen enters your lungs. Like how your eyes read a page of words formed into a poem. There's nothing more to it. I see. So, knowing about containment breaches that have occurred, or are objects, or ancient history, it just comes to your mind when it's relevant? Yeah, I suppose that's a good way to put it. Very interesting. Thank you. But back to where you're from, tell me about this king you met. I'm very interested in the story. Very well. I had arrived in the great city of Redacted. I had finished creating my fire and establishing my camp as the ruins of the city, and its fires blew away in the sandy winds. This man, wearing only a dirty crown and, as I said, what looked to be merely a sack, approached me. He sat down with a saddest look on his face as I roasted food over the fire. I assumed he smelt what I was cooking. I asked him, "Your kingdom was like this when I arrived. What has happened, my dear friend?" He replied, "I sat idle on my throne as I heard the drums and rumors of the sea people. I had thought them to be a myth, though it appears the myth itself was as threatening as the reality. My people protested as my coffers and granaries dried. Protests turned into riots. Riots turned to revolts. Revolt into war. What you see is what remains. What a sea person has never touched." I nodded as he explained his woes. Saddened at his loss, as it seemed he did in fact care for his subjects, I consoled him. Your people may be gone, your grand city now reduced to what we see now, but I can help you. He seemed bewildered. His look still brings me a smile. He asked, "How?" I offered him a cup of water for his parched throat, and said, "I can help make sure this never happens to anyone else again. I can use your land as an example, and your sorrow as a tool." He looked at me with watering eyes, said thank you, and from there on, I knew my purpose. End log. Closing statement. Upon finishing the story, SCP-6141 began to pack its things and started to leave, telling Dr. Blackwell, quote, "It's best that we both go home." Dr. Blackwell politely wished goodbye to SCP-6141, and he and his security team were extracted shortly thereafter. Addendum 6141-4 Incident Log SCP-6141-1 Dr. Blackwell received a letter made by SCP-6141 during a later instance 4 months after their last meeting, which was delivered to him after inspection for censoring. The letter reads the following. Dear Dr. Blackwell, I hope my letter finds you well in these times. I did not know who to pen my letter to in your foundation, and I recalled your name from our last conversation first. Something pushed me to contact you rather than be contacted, as our usual dialogue goes. I must thank you, as always, for listening to me and talking to me. I was asked in another instance, as you put it, if I had met anyone not from the Foundation, aside from the king in the bag. I answered that yes, I have, and not all of them have been the nicest of people I have met, including some from your Foundation. But that's just how things are. You, however, are the first one I had told that story to, and it reminded me of something. What I had seen prior to arriving at that king's lands, I have seen these very days. Writing that is painful, and I've struggled to put to word what I feel. Anxiety, dread, fear, all words that I have not felt before and wish I could never feel again. However, these are how things are, and I cannot ignore these feelings without doing something about it, a quality I see in the Foundation every time I meet them. There will be a time when we will all be tested, even me. It could be tomorrow, this week, next year, or in a millennia, but I can see that it is coming. I cannot warn you directly, but I can tell you the future is bright. Despite all the horrors your organization and others fight, despite all the horrors created by your adversaries and more, continually, I have seen you and others tip the scales in the favor of humanity. Maybe, just maybe, we will be ready. Dr. Blackwell, we are all capable of seeing past the darkness through the help of each other and making sense of chaos together. We are never alone. All of you and the Foundation are never alone. Take this letter and all I have said, and in the coming times I hope that it reminds you and your Foundation of what you fight for. I will continue teaching. Forever your friend, a friend. Note from Dr. Blackwell. Due to incident SCP-6141-1, I will be putting in a request to have SCP-6141 be re-evaluated and redesignated as a Thamuel object. Whatever it is that SCP-6141 sees coming, it believes that if we keep our path, everything will be alright. Its teachings are valuable, as we've seen, and I think you'll agree with me that SCP-6141 can provide so much more as a tool, and an ally. Thank you for listening to SCP-6141. If you enjoyed this SCP, please follow the link in the description to the SCP Wiki and vote it up to support it and the SCP Wiki as a whole. Also, if you have any SCPs you'd like for me to do, please leave a comment below, and I'll see what I can do.